The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and sleepless nights, a place where joy and fear walked hand in hand. Outside the maternity ward, the mother-in-law stood rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line that betrayed a storm of judgment. She had arrived with a purpose sharpened by years of resentment, convinced that the woman who had just given birth to her grandchild was unworthy of the family name. Nurses moved quietly around her, whispering encouragement to new parents, but she ignored them, pacing like a prosecutor rehearsing a closing argument. When the door finally opened and the young mother appeared, pale yet radiant, clutching a bundle of new life, the older woman's voice cut through the air. She demanded explanations, accused her daughter-in-law of manipulation, of trapping her son, of weakness. The words fell like stones, each one heavier than the last. The new mother tried to speak, but exhaustion and shock stole her breath. She had imagined this day differently, soft smiles, congratulations, perhaps even reconciliation, but instead she faced a wall of hostility. The mother-in-law insisted she leave the hospital immediately, claiming the family would handle matters properly without her. The cruelty of the demand stunned everyone nearby. A nurse stepped forward, reminding her that the patient had just given birth and needed rest, but the older woman waved her off, intoxicated by her own authority. For a moment, it seemed as if the young mother might collapse under the weight of humiliation, her tears threatening to spill onto the white tiles. Then the air shifted. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, confident and unmistakable, drawing curious glances. Conversations fell silent as a tall figure approached, his presence commanding attention without effort. Gordon Ramsay, unmistakable even out of the kitchen, strode forward with the intensity of a man who had faced chaos and refused to blink. He had been invited to the hospital for a charity event supporting neonatal care, but the raised voices had caught his attention. He stopped, took in the scene, and his expression hardened, not with anger alone, but with resolve. Ramsay listened for only a moment before intervening. His voice, sharp yet controlled, sliced through the tension. He asked what was going on, and the mother-in-law, mistaking his interest for approval, launched into her grievances. She spoke of standards, of family honor, of how this woman had failed to measure up. Ramsay didn't interrupt. He waited, letting the words hang in the air, exposing their ugliness. When she finished, he leaned in slightly, eyes steady, and spoke with a calm that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. He told her she was out of line. He reminded her that childbirth was not a performance to be judged, but a moment of courage and vulnerability. He spoke about respect earned through compassion, not demanded through intimidation. The corridor seemed to hold its breath as he continued, dismantling her arguments with precision. Each sentence landed cleanly, like a chef's knife finding its mark. Nurses nodded. Visitors paused. The young mother looked up, disbelief mixing with gratitude. The mother-in-law tried to interrupt, but Ramsay raised a hand, not aggressively, just firmly enough to signal that he was not finished. He said that family was built on support, not control, and that if she couldn't offer kindness, she had no right to stand there issuing commands. His words were not loud, but they carried authority born of experience, of leadership under pressure, of knowing when standards mattered and when humanity mattered more. For the first time, the older woman faltered. Her mouth opened, then closed. The certainty she had clung to evaporated, leaving her speechless. The young mother felt something shift inside her. The shame that had pressed down on her chest loosened its grip. She straightened, adjusting her hold on the baby, and met her mother-in-law's gaze with quiet strength. Ramsay turned to her then, his tone softening. He congratulated her, told her she had done something extraordinary, and wished her and the child health and peace. The kindness in his eyes undid her completely, and tears finally fell, not of despair, but of relief. As security gently guided the mother-in-law away, murmurs rippled through the corridor. The incident became a quiet legend among the staff, a reminder that cruelty could be challenged, even in the most vulnerable moments. Ramsay didn't linger. He nodded to the nurses, adjusted his jacket, and continued on his way, leaving behind a sense of restored balance. For the young mother, the memory of that confrontation would remain etched in her mind, not as a moment of rejection, but as the day someone unexpected stood up for her when she needed it most. Later that week, the story took on a second life far from the hospital walls. On a brightly lit stage, during what was supposed to be a lighthearted segment on the Kelly Clarkson show, the topic surfaced in a roundabout way. A discussion about public confrontations and boundaries turned personal when a comment minimized the seriousness of such moments, suggesting people should simply toughen up. Ramsay, invited as a guest to talk about leadership and mentorship, bristled. The casual dismissal struck a nerve, echoing the cruelty he had witnessed. What followed was not a tantrum, but a fiery confrontation fueled by conviction. Ramsay challenged the notion that strength meant silence, arguing that real toughness lay in standing up for those who couldn't. His voice rose, passion evident, as he spoke about accountability and empathy. The studio audience shifted, sensing the gravity beneath the entertainment. Clarkson attempted to steer the conversation back, but Ramsay was resolute. He finished his point, stood, and walked off the set, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Clips of the moment spread rapidly, debated and dissected online. Some criticized the outburst, others praised it as overdue honesty. But for one woman at home, rocking her newborn in the quiet hours of the night, the footage meant something deeply personal. She recognized the same fire, the same refusal to accept injustice. It reminded her that even when voices try to push you out, to tell you that you don't belong, there can be unexpected allies willing to speak up. Life moved forward. The baby grew stronger each day. The mother-in-law remained distant, her authority diminished by that single moment of reckoning. And somewhere between the clatter of kitchens and the glow of studio lights, Gordon Ramsay continued to be exactly who he was: intense, uncompromising, and, when it mattered most, fiercely human. The maternity ward was meant to be a place of beginnings, where the sharp cries of newborns mixed with laughter, relief, and quiet prayers. Yet on that particular morning, tension spread through the hallway like a cold draft. The mother-in-law arrived unannounced, her heels striking the floor with purpose, her face carved into an expression of disapproval long before she spoke a word. She barely glanced at the nurses, brushed past a bouquet meant for another family, and headed straight toward the room where her daughter-in-law lay recovering from childbirth. In her mind, she had already decided the outcome of this visit, and nothing about the pale walls or the fragile miracle that had just occurred softened her resolve. Inside the room, the young woman lay propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing in that quiet way only new mothers do. The baby slept against her chest, tiny fingers curled instinctively, trusting the world without question. When the door swung open, the atmosphere changed instantly. The mother-in-law's voice followed before her full figure even crossed the threshold. There were no congratulations, no questions about health, no gentle curiosity about the child. Instead, accusations spilled out, about disgrace, about shame, about how this birth had complicated everything rather than completed it. The words struck harder than the physical pain of labor ever had. The young mother felt herself shrink, her heart pounding as she struggled to process what she was hearing. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that a child might bridge the distance between them. Instead, the gap widened into something cruel and unforgiving. The mother-in-law declared that she had no place in the family anymore, that once discharged she should leave quietly and not expect support. When the young woman tried to respond, her voice trembled and failed her. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of the woman who seemed determined to erase her. Nurses intervened, gently but firmly, reminding the visitor of hospital rules and the patient's condition. That only fueled the older woman's anger. She accused the staff of interference, of taking sides, of not understanding family matters. Her voice echoed down the corridor, drawing stares and uneasy silence from other families. It was then that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Gordon Ramsay had been walking through the ward as part of a charity initiative supporting maternal health. Used to chaos, shouting, and high-pressure environments, he immediately recognized the difference between stress and outright cruelty. He slowed his pace as the raised voices reached him, his brow furrowing as he took in the scene unfolding just outside the room. One look at the young mother's face was enough. The exhaustion, the vulnerability, the quiet dignity, it all told a story words didn't need to explain. He stepped forward and asked, calmly but loudly enough to command attention, what was going on. The mother-in-law turned toward him, irritation flashing across her face before recognition dawned. She seized the opportunity, explaining her version of events with dramatic flair, portraying herself as the wronged party trying to fix a mistake. Ramsay listened, arms crossed, his jaw tightening with every sentence. When she finally paused, clearly expecting agreement or at least neutrality, he spoke. He didn't raise his voice at first. That restraint made his words cut deeper. He said what she was doing was unacceptable. He spoke about respect, about the responsibility of family, about how bringing a child into the world required strength that deserved admiration, not condemnation. As he continued, his tone sharpened, controlled anger replacing politeness. He dismantled her arguments one by one, exposing them as excuses for control rather than concern. This wasn't about standards or tradition, he said, it was about ego. The corridor felt electrified. Staff stood frozen. Visitors pretended not to stare while listening to every word. The mother-in-law tried to interrupt, but Ramsay didn't let her. He told her that if she couldn't offer support, the kindest thing she could do was leave. For the first time since she arrived, she had nothing to say. Her confidence drained away, replaced by shock and humiliation. Security appeared quietly, and within moments she was escorted out, her earlier fury reduced to stunned silence. Ramsay turned back to the young mother. His expression softened completely. He congratulated her, praised her strength, and told her she had every right to be proud. The simple acknowledgement felt like a lifeline. She nodded, unable to speak, tears finally slipping down her cheeks as the weight of the confrontation lifted. He wished her well and walked away, never looking back, leaving behind a room filled with relief and quiet gratitude. The story might have ended there, a powerful but private moment shared among those who witnessed it. But days later, during a taping of the Clarkson show, the subject of public conflict and personal boundaries came up in conversation. What began as casual commentary took a sharp turn when someone downplayed the seriousness of emotional abuse, suggesting people were too sensitive and should just endure it. Ramsay stiffened in his chair, the memory of the hospital still fresh. He challenged the comment immediately. His voice grew louder, his frustration visible. He spoke about what he had seen, about how words could wound just as deeply as actions, especially when someone was at their most vulnerable. Clarkson attempted to defuse the moment, steering the conversation toward humor, but Ramsay refused to let it slide. His passion spilled over, turning the discussion into a fiery confrontation that crackled with intensity. He made his point clearly: silence in the face of cruelty only empowers it. Then, without waiting for applause or approval, he stood up and walked off the set. The studio was left in stunned quiet, cameras rolling, producers scrambling. Within hours, clips flooded social media, opinions dividing sharply. Some called it unprofessional. Others called it brave. Back at home, the young mother watched the clip late at night while feeding her baby. She recognized the same conviction, the same unwillingness to compromise when it came to basic human decency. It made her smile through tired eyes. She didn't know Ramsay personally, and he likely wouldn't remember her face among so many, but his intervention had changed something fundamental. It reminded her that she wasn't powerless, that dignity didn't require permission. Time passed. The baby grew, filling the small apartment with new sounds and routines. The mother-in-law remained distant, her authority forever broken by that single moment when someone unexpected refused to let her dominate the narrative. And for the young woman, that day at the hospital became a turning point, not just because someone defended her, but because it taught her that sometimes, the most powerful support comes from the least expected place, arriving exactly when silence would have been unbearable.